A lone writer arrives in a quiet town, only to uncover secrets the locals refuse to speak aloud. When Thomas enters the abandoned roads estate, he expects dust and silence. Instead, he finds hidden rooms, strange humming in the walls, and a woman's shadow watching him from the balcony. The deeper he investigates, the more the house awakens, and the more impossible it becomes to escape. This story unfolds with slow-burn suspense, eerie twists, and a mystery that grows darker with every chapter. If you love atmospheric storytelling, old mansions with secrets, and psychological tension that lingers long after the video ends, this is the journey for you. Enter if you dare, because once the house notices you, it never lets go. Norah Williams had grown used to grand stages, glittering halls, and the sort of applause that lifted her spirit like wings. For years, she had performed at high-end weddings in Lagos, events filled with noise, laughter, camera flashes, and crowds wearing shining fabrics and loud perfumes. She wasn't just a singer, she was a presence. The kind of woman who stepped into a room and shifted its energy. She had built a 6-person performance group. Chloe, her closest friend and backup vocalist. Calvin, the band's gentle percussionist. Mark and Daniel, the guitarists. And Lisa, the group's bright-eyed dancer who could sway with any rhythm. They were professionals. They were polished. And the truth was simple. Everyone wanted them. That Thursday afternoon began like any other. Norah had just finished rehearsing a new melody when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it. She hated unknown numbers, but something made her answer. "Hello," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. A voice replied. Almost too perfect, like melted honey poured into her ear. "Good afternoon, Miss Williams. I would like to hire your group." His tone was calm, controlled, almost unnaturally steady. She immediately sat up straighter. "For when?" she asked. "Tonight." Her eyebrows lifted. Last-minute bookings usually meant trouble. But before she could think of a polite refusal, the voice continued. "It is my daughter's wedding. You will perform 3 sets. Payment will be transferred immediately." Norah waited for him to ask the price. Instead, she heard the sound of a notification on her phone. Full payment. Already sent. No negotiation. No hesitation. Her heart skipped. Nobody did that. Nobody paid without even asking the details. "Sir, you didn't confirm the amount." "You are worth it," the voice replied simply. "And my people appreciate your music." His people. The phrase slid into her mind strangely, leaving a quiet discomfort behind. Norah forced a smile even though he couldn't see it. "Okay. Where is the location?" "I will send the address. You must arrive before 10 p.m. Before she could ask why, the call ended. Not even a goodbye. The silence on the line was quick and final, like a door shutting. Within seconds, her phone pinged again with a message. Address. When she opened it, her stomach tightened. A private mansion outside Lagos, deep into the forest roads near Ape. A place people rarely passed by, even during the day. Norah felt a strange chill crawl across her skin, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself that money was money. Clients who lived in secluded areas existed all the time. Wealthy families with private estates liked privacy. It wasn't new. Still, the feeling didn't leave her. When she informed the band, reactions were mixed. Chloe frowned deeply. "A forest road wedding at night?" she asked. "That sounds like a horror movie waiting to happen." Calvin laughed nervously. "Maybe they just want something private." Lisa, always carefree, tossed her braids over her shoulder. "As long as they feed us and pay well, I'm in." Mark and Daniel shrugged, but Norah could tell they were uneasy too. They trusted her though. And she trusted her instincts. Even though they were whispering warnings she kept ignoring. By evening they were dressed and ready. The group always traveled in 2 black SUVs for performances, both sleek and polished. Norah wore a shining silver gown that hugged her shape elegantly, with subtle glitter that caught every light. Her long wavy wig fell over her shoulders like a cascade. The others wore coordinated outfits, Bold colors, sharp tuxedos, gold details, because appearances mattered at luxury events. The drive started smoothly. Lagos city lights faded behind them as the roads grew quieter. By the time they reached the outskirts, the night sky had grown heavy and the forest grew thicker around them. The headlights cut through the darkness, revealing tall trees that leaned inward like they were listening. "This place is too quiet," Chloe whispered. Norah swallowed. "We're almost there." But she wasn't sure. The address led them deeper and deeper until suddenly, almost too suddenly, the mansion appeared. It stood tall, white, and spotless in the middle of the darkness, as if the forest had stepped aside just to reveal it. Towering glass windows gleamed like mirrors, but oddly, they didn't reflect the headlights. The trees around it were perfectly still, not swaying with the wind. Even the air felt controlled. There were no guards, no noise, no parked cars. Just a massive gate that opened on its own the moment the SUV stopped before it. Lisa let out a shaky laugh. "Wow, high-tech." But Norah didn't laugh. A shiver ran down her spine, cold and sharp. Something about the gate opening without any visible sensors felt wrong. Not magical, not impressive, just wrong. Inside the compound, the mansion was breathtaking. Marble stairs, golden pillars, crystal lights that sparkled like stars. But something about the beauty felt unnatural, too symmetrical, too polished. The family greeted them at the entrance. 3 women and 2 men, all dressed in bright clothing, vivid fabrics, and wide smiles. Their faces were almost perfect. No wrinkles, no blemishes, no signs of stress. Even their eyes seemed to shine unnaturally, like glass marbles with light trapped behind them. "Welcome," one of the men said, smiling too widely. Norah returned the smile cautiously. "Thank you for having us." As they were led inside, Norah's heels clicked on the immaculate marble floor. The air smelled faintly of flowers, but not the usual kind. A strange sweetness that felt almost chemical. They entered the main hall, and Norah's breath caught. The ballroom was enormous. Bigger than any hall she had ever performed in. Ceiling painted like a night sky. Walls shimmering as if dusted with tiny diamonds. But it was empty. No bride. No groom. No chairs. No tables. No guests. It felt like standing inside a beautiful hollow shell. Chloe leaned close to Norah. "Are we early?" Norah checked the time. "It's 10 p.m. sharp." The man who greeted them spoke again. "Set up. The guests will arrive soon." Something about the way he said "arrive" made Norah's skin prickle. But she nodded, forcing calm into her voice. "Let's get ready, everyone." They began setting up their instruments. Every sound, tapping, tuning, lifting, echoed too loudly in the empty space. It was as though the room swallowed their noise and pushed it back at them. At exactly 10:30 p.m., Norah felt a shift in the air. Cold gust, a faint vibration under her feet. Then they began appearing. Not walking in, peering. One moment the ballroom was empty. The next people stood there. Dozens, and more. Then hundreds. Norah's jaw tightened. Chloe's hand froze mid-air. Calvin's drumstick almost slipped from his fingers. The guests were beautiful. Perfect skin. Perfect hair. Perfect faces. But they did not walk. They glided. And when they turned their heads, the movement was too smooth, like their necks were on hinges. Did you see that?" Calvin whispered behind her. Norah forced herself not to react. "Not yet. Just keep setting up." But her heart beat faster, and somewhere deep inside her spirit whispered, "Something is very, very wrong." The moment the guests appeared, Norah's breath stalled in her chest. One heartbeat ago, the room had been an echoing, empty hall. Now it was full, too full, with silent, glowing figures. They stood perfectly still, positioned in neat lines as if arranged by an invisible hand. For a few seconds nobody moved. Not the guest, not the band, not even Norah. It was Chloe who broke the freeze. She touched Norah's arm lightly and whispered, "Norah, they didn't walk in. I swear they didn't walk in." Norah swallowed the hard lump in her throat and forced a smile she didn't feel. Because no one, absolutely no one, could panic. Not here. Start the music, she whispered. Their amplifiers hummed to life. Instruments clicked, strings vibrated, and faint melodies floated into the air. But the sound felt swallowed immediately, like the hall didn't want it, like the room absorbed the music instead of letting it echo. The guests stood motionless at first, not blinking, not breathing visibly, just staring. Then, as if someone gave a silent signal, their heads all turned at once, every single one toward the stage. The synchronized movements snapped through the room like a whip. Chloe gasped and clutched Norah's gown. Calvin dropped a drumstick. Norah's hands trembled, but she lifted the microphone, inhaled slowly, and began to sing. Her voice cracked at first, thin with fear, but she steadied it. She sang a soft love ballad, the type expected at a wedding. The guests didn't react at first. They simply stared, eyes glassy and too bright. Then slowly, eerily, they began to move. Not in rhythm. Not like humans. Their bodies glided across the floor with smooth motions that ignored the laws of balance. Their feet barely touched the ground. Their limbs swayed as though they had no joints, flowing like water inside fabric. It was like watching dancers underwater, beautiful but unsettling. Calvin's voice quivered behind her. They're not dancing. They're floating. Norah wanted to turn and hush him, but she couldn't look away. She couldn't risk missing the smallest detail of the creatures surrounding them. She could feel Chloe trembling beside her. They're smiling, Chloe breathed. Norah wished they weren't. Because the smiles did not reach their eyes. The guests' faces remained stiff, unchanging, except for their mouths which stretched wider than comfortable. Some smiles were too big, too sharp. Some were crooked like painted masks. Still singing, Norah forced herself to focus on one single thought. Just keep performing. Do not panic. Do not run. Asterisk asterisk. After a few minutes, something even stranger happened. The guests began speaking. But not like humans. Their voices were soft, layered, and echoed oddly, like several voices coming from one mouth. They murmured while dancing, fragments of words that didn't fit together. Norah heard. Warm voices borrowed time. Another voice. The singer glows. And another. Not like us, not from here. Her spine turned to ice. She wanted to stop singing. She wanted to run. But she didn't. She couldn't. Halfway through the second song, one of the women in a shimmering gold gown glided toward her. Her robe swayed as though pushed by a wind only she could feel. She moved without stepping, just floating closer and closer. Norah kept singing, but her pulse thundered. The woman reached the stage. She lifted a hand. Her fingers were long, too long, and thin like sculpted ivory. She touched Norah's cheek with her palm. Norah jerked back immediately. The woman's skin burned. Not warm. Not overheated. Burning. Scorching like metal left under the sun. A thin smile spread across the woman's face. You shine, she whispered in a voice that felt like cold breath. You vibrate differently. Norah's heart tripped in her chest. Chloe's eyes widened with terror. Calvin looked faint. Daniel and Mark exchanged petrified glances. Norah didn't stop singing. She couldn't afford to. Her mind screamed. They notice us. They know we're not like them. The woman drifted back into the crowd. And then, as though midnight was a cue, the atmosphere shifted. The air became heavier, almost thick enough to touch. Lights flickered. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, stretching across the floor like living things. And then, in one horrifying instant shift, the guests began changing. It wasn't slow. It wasn't subtle. It was like someone turned a page in a book, and all the characters changed at once. The beautiful faces rippled like liquid, their perfect features bending, melting, rearranging. Some grew too tall, some too thin, some sprouted elongated limbs. A few bent backward at impossible angles. Calvin's hands dropped from the drums entirely. Lisa muffled a scream. One guest's mouth opened and opened and opened, stretching far wider than any human mouth should be able to. A deep, vibrating hum filled the room, shaking the chandeliers, rattling Norah's skull. Mark whispered, horrified. "We're in the wrong place. We're in the wrong world." Norah kept her voice steady even though she could feel tears burning behind her eyes. "Don't run," she whispered without moving her lips. "Don't stop. Just sing." The guests began swaying in strange patterns. Circles, spirals, crisscrossing steps. Movements too synchronized and too complex to be improvised. Some floated. Some twisted. Some became blur-like figures that flickered in and out of visibility. It was mesmerizing. It was terrifying. It was wrong. Then suddenly, without warning, every light in the hall shut off. Total darkness swallowed them. Heavy. Alive. Norah couldn't even see her own hand. Chloe grabbed her arm. "Norah! Norah, what's happening?" "Stay still," Norah whispered. "Stay silent." But the darkness wasn't silent. The humming grew louder, vibrating through the walls, the floors, their bones. It felt as if the darkness wasn't just around them, but inside them. Calvin whimpered, "Please. Please tell me this isn't real." Then came the whisper, right behind Norah's ear. Breathy, cold. "Where are you going, singer?" Norah's entire body turned to stone. Her breath stopped. Her skin prickled violently. Every instinct inside her screamed to run. She didn't turn around. She didn't respond. She didn't breathe. Then the whisper came again, closer. "Faye, we haven't finished the dance." Norah snapped. "Run," she whispered sharply. "Now." Her voice trembled with fear, not volume but urgency. She reached blindly through the darkness, grabbing Chloe and pushing forward. The band scattered in panic, bumping into unseen shapes. The darkness moved with them, like it had shape and intention. Something brushed past her leg, soft, tall, cold. Something tugged at her hair. Something whispered again. Hands, too many, brushed her arms as she stumbled forward. Norah didn't look. She didn't dare. "Find the door," she hissed. Their footsteps were frantic, stumbling, scraping across marble floor. The room seemed to stretch unnaturally. The exit felt impossibly far. She reached out blindly, expecting to touch a wall. Her fingers brushed something hanging, a velvet curtain, then something else. Hand. Cold. Long. Inhuman. It touched her back. She jerked away with a silent scream. "This way," Norah whispered urgently. Her hand finally struck wood, a door. She shoved it open with every bit of strength she had. A blast of cold outside air hit them. Grass under their feet. Freedom. Out. Go, 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 Norah shouted. The band fell through the doorway like panicked birds escaping a cage. They ran. Crossed the lawn. Toward the SUVs. But when they reached the driveway, their vehicles were gone. Where are the cars?" Chloe screamed. Calvin spun in circles. "They were right here. They were right here." Norah turned back toward the mansion, breath shaking. The building stood completely dark. Silent. Not a single sign of movement. As if nothing had ever happened. As if the nightmare inside had never begun. As if the house itself was pretending innocence. Norah grabbed Chloe's hand. "Don't look too long," she whispered. "Don't let it see you looking." A sudden flash of light came from the mansion. All windows lit up at once. In every window, tall silhouettes appeared. Dozens. Hundreds. Watching. Waiting. Norah's voice broke. "Run!" And they ran into the night. Morning arrived reluctantly, dragging a gray sky behind it like a tired curtain. Thomas stood by the window in his small rented room, watching mist roll over the distant hills like waves brushing a silent shore. The town still looked peaceful, almost deceptively so, but his mind refused to rest. He couldn't stop replaying what he saw at the river the night before. The sudden flicker of lanterns, the strange rhythmic humming, the brief shadow of a figure in white disappearing between the trees. It clung to him like a stubborn dream refusing to fade. Thomas rubbed his eyes and forced himself away from the window. Today he told himself he needed answers. And there was only one place to start. The old Rhodes estate. He had seen lights flicker in the upper windows 2 nights in a row, despite everyone insisting the mansion was abandoned. There had to be someone inside or something. He grabbed his notebook, slipped it into his bag and stepped into the hallway. The innkeeper, Mrs. Jeffries, caught sight of him as he approached the stairs. "Heading out early again?" she asked, her voice soft but weighted with something unspoken. "Yes," Thomas replied. "Just doing some research." Her eyes narrowed with quiet concern. "Research is fine, dear. Just remember that some stones are left unturned for a reason." "Is that supposed to comfort me?" he asked with a half-smile. "It's supposed to warn you," she said. "Carefully." Thomas nodded politely and exited the inn, but the warning only increased his resolve. If the entire town acted like they were hiding something, then whatever they were hiding must be worth discovering. The road to the estate. Thomas walked the long dirt path leading to the Rhodes estate. The road wound through tall, swaying grass and clusters of old oaks that seemed older than the town itself. Birds flew overhead, but their silence felt unnatural, almost deliberate, as if the forest held its breath. Halfway through his walk, Thomas spotted a man kneeling in the grass. The stranger appeared to be sketching quick lines in a notebook, his attention fixed on something half buried in the dirt. Thomas approached slowly. "Morning," he said. The stranger looked up sharply, startled. He was thin, sharp-faced, with unruly hair and dark, restless eyes. He seemed both shy and watchful, like a bird that might fly away if Thomas moved too fast. "Oh, good morning," the stranger said. "Didn't see you there." "Are you all right?" Thomas asked. "Need help?" The man quickly closed his notebook. "No help needed. Just studying tracks." Thomas glanced at the ground. "Tracks? Of what?" The man hesitated before answering. "Not sure yet." His voice wavered slightly, but he stood straight and cleared his throat. "My name's Cole," he added. "Cole Harrow." "Thomas Hale," Thomas replied. "Writer." Cole nodded as if this explained everything. "Be careful where you're headed. The Rhodes estate isn't a friendly place. You've been there." Cole shifted his weight uncomfortably. "Once. It was enough." Thomas's curiosity sharpened. "What happened?" Cole looked around as if someone might be listening. Even the wind paused. Then he whispered, "I heard someone singing in the walls." Before Thomas could respond, Cole backed away, clutching his notebook protectively. "Stay away from the mansion," he warned. "And if you go there, don't go alone." With that, Cole hurried off, disappearing into the tall grass like a ghost. At the iron gates. Thomas reached the estate gates shortly after noon. The iron bars were twisted with age, covered in vines thick as ropes. A large sign hung crookedly from the gate, rusted and nearly unreadable, but he could make out one word: "Keep out." He pushed gently, expecting resistance. To his surprise, the gate creaked open easily, as if someone passed through regularly. The estate grounds were enormous. Acres of overgrown gardens, collapsed gazebos and crumbling statues. Weeds wrapped around everything like skeletal fingers reclaiming their territory. The mansion itself loomed in the distance, tall, dark, with boarded windows and a roof that sagged like a tired spine. Despite its decay, something about it felt alive, watching. Thomas swallowed hard and stepped forward. The crunch of gravel under his boots sounded too loud in the heavy quiet. As he approached the mansion steps, a sudden tremor of movement caught the corner of his eye. He turned sharply. Someone stood on the balcony above. Woman. Her dress flowed like mist in the wind. Her hair fell over her face, obscuring her expression. She remained perfectly still, hands resting gently on the railing, as if she had been waiting for him. Thomas froze. "Hello," he called up. She didn't respond. He took a step closer. "Can you hear me?" The woman tilted her head, just slightly, but enough to send a cold thrill up his spine. Without warning, she turned and walked back into the house, disappearing behind the broken curtains. Thomas's heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. Instead, he went up the steps. #### inside the mansion. The front doors groaned open, revealing a vast entry hall. Dust floated lazily in the air. The chandelier hung precariously by a single chain, casting distorted shadows across the cracked marble floor. Thomas stepped inside. The air was cold. Not normal cold, but the kind that felt weighted like something unseen pressed against the skin. He looked up the grand staircase, half expecting the woman to appear again. But the balcony was empty. He took a few careful steps deeper into the house. The floorboards groaned beneath him. A soft sound echoed through the hallway. A woman humming. Not random humming. Melodic, haunting, almost familiar. The same hum he heard by the river. The sound multiplied, as if coming from multiple rooms at once. Thomas couldn't tell where it originated. He followed the sound down a corridor lined with old portraits. Faces with dark, hollow eyes seemed to watch him pass. The humming grew louder, closer. He reached a tall door slightly ajar. The humming stopped, just as Thomas raised a hand to push it open. Bang! The door slammed shut from the inside. Thomas stumbled back, adrenaline surging. Before he could process it, a voice spoke behind him. "What are you doing here?" Thomas spun around. A man stood at the end of the corridor, tall, stern, wearing a long black coat. His gray hair was pulled back, and his gaze was sharp as glass. Thomas swallowed. I'm researching the history of the estate. I thought it was abandoned." "It is," the man replied stiffly. "And yet here you are, trespassing." "I saw someone on the balcony," Thomas said. "A woman." The man's expression didn't change. "You saw what you wanted to see." "No," Thomas insisted. "She looked right at me." The man's jaw twitched. "You should leave," he said. "Now, before you see more than you can handle." Thomas hesitated. "Who are you?" The man turned away. "No one you need to know." He began walking toward the entrance. Thomas felt a surge of determination. "Wait, please. Tell me what's going on here." The man paused but didn't face him. Then he said in a low, icy voice, "The past is not dead in this place. It wakes when disturbed." With that, he disappeared through the front doors, leaving Thomas alone in the hallway. #### the room that should not be open. Thomas stood frozen, breath shallow. He looked back at the door that had slammed shut moments earlier. Slowly, cautiously, he turned the knob. It opened easily this time. Inside was a dimly lit bedroom. The curtains hung in tatters. The furniture was draped in dusty sheets. Yet something felt off. The air smelled faintly of lavender. Fresh, not old. On a small table rested a porcelain comb, untouched by dust. Next to it sat a music box, decorated with delicate silver vines. Thomas approached it. Hesitating, he opened the lid. A soft melody played, a slow, eerie lullaby. The same tune he had heard in the halls. His skin prickled. Suddenly, the music stopped on its own mid-note. The lid snapped shut. Then Thomas heard it. A whisper, right beside his ear. "Leave." Thomas spun around, heart slamming in his chest. But the room was empty. Thomas staggered out of the room and into the corridor, breathing hard. The whisper still echoed in his ears, soft but unmistakably human. The house seemed to press in on him from all sides, as though the walls were listening and thinking. He leaned his back against the wall to steady himself. His mind raced, but he forced it to slow down to analyze the situation. He wasn't imagining the voice. He wasn't imagining the woman. He wasn't imagining the man who wanted him gone. Something was very wrong inside the Rhodes estate. Thomas swallowed hard and reached for his notebook. His hands trembled as he flipped it open and scribbled notes quickly. Asterisk bedroom. Lavender scent, fresh. Music box. Melody cut off abruptly. Whisper, female voice, said leave. Not hallucination. Felt breath on skin. Asterisk. He stared at the page, the words looking surreal. If he wasn't careful, the house would swallow him, figuratively or literally. But fear and fascination were intertwined now. Walking away felt impossible. Something in this place wanted him to leave. And something else wanted him to stay. Hashtag a hidden staircase. Thomas moved deeper into the corridor. Each step felt heavier, as though the air thickened with the smell of old wood and faded memories. He passed a tall mirror rotting in its frame. When he glanced at his reflection, he nearly jumped. For a brief moment, a woman's silhouette stood behind him. Then it vanished when he blinked. Thomas slowly exhaled and kept moving. At the end of the hallway, he noticed a faint draft pushing against his ankles. There shouldn't be wind, not in a sealed interior space. He knelt down, running his hand along the floor. A thin line of air seeped between two floorboards. His pulse quickened. He ran his fingers along the edges until he found a small metal ring embedded in the wood, painted over and almost invisible. He tugged on it. A square section of the floor lifted like a trapdoor. A hidden staircase descended into darkness. Thomas hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him not to go down there. But curiosity overpowered fear. He took out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The narrow wooden stairs creaked as he descended, each step groaning as though it resented his presence. At the bottom, he reached a cramped stone corridor. The air was colder here, almost icy. His breath fogged. He pressed forward. Hashtag the underground room. The corridor opened into a circular chamber. The walls were lined with shelves holding dusty jars and old manuscripts. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table, covered in papers, ink bottles, and strange diagrams. Thomas approached cautiously. He lifted one of the papers. It was a hand-drawn map of the estate, but with hidden rooms and tunnels not shown in any public records. Another sheet depicted a rough sketch of a woman's face. Sharp features, long hair, dark eyes that looked almost alive on the page. Below it, a name was scribbled. Eleanor Rhodes. Thomas's breath caught. The Rhodes family had disappeared decades ago under mysterious circumstances. But no one ever spoke about Eleanor. As he studied the drawing, he suddenly heard footsteps echoing behind him. Low, steady, coming from the corridor. He turned off his phone's light instantly and crouched behind the table, heart pounding so hard he thought it might give him away. A dim glow grew brighter as someone approached with a lantern. The tall man from earlier stepped into the chamber. He walked directly to the table, his lantern illuminating the sketch Thomas had just examined. His expression hardened. So someone was here, he muttered. Thomas stayed frozen, barely breathing. The man clenched his jaw and spoke to himself. Eleanor, if you are still lingering in this place, I won't let him wake you. Thomas's eyes widened. Wake her. What did that mean? Before Thomas could process it, the lantern's flame flickered violently. The temperature dropped even more. The man stiffened. Not again, he whispered. A sudden wind swept through the chamber despite the lack of windows. Papers flew off the table. The lantern blew out completely, plunging the room into darkness. The man inhaled sharply and backed away. Eleanor, stop this, he said, voice tight. Thomas heard him retreat, footsteps scrambling up the stairs. The moment he was gone, the wind ceased. Silence. A single, unmistakable female whisper drifted through the darkness. You shouldn't have come. Thomas's blood ran cold. He fumbled for his phone and turned the flashlight back on. The beam shook in his hand. The chamber was empty, but the papers he had seen moments earlier were scattered across the floor, and the portrait of Eleanor lay face up near his feet, as though someone had placed it there deliberately. He grabbed the sketch and stuffed it into his notebook. Then he bolted toward the staircase. ###, the house fights back. Thomas climbed the stairs fast. Too fast. His foot slipped on one of the rotten steps, and he fell forward, catching himself on his elbows. Pain shot up his arm, but adrenaline pushed him on. He reached the floor above and pulled himself out of the trapdoor, slamming it shut behind him. He leaned against the wall, panting, sweat mixing with dust. Then he heard another sound. Creaking. A slow, rhythmic creak, like someone rocking back and forth in a chair. He turned toward the end of the corridor. A chair now sat directly in the hallway. A chair that had not been there minutes ago. It rocked gently, though no one sat in it. The house was rearranging itself. Thomas stepped back, his throat tightening. He whispered under his breath, "This place is alive." The rocking sped up. The bedroom door he had visited earlier creaked open on its own. The humming returned, soft, trembling, echoing through the hallways. Thomas backed away, his heart pounding. He didn't look back, he just ran. He sprinted down the stairs, across the grand foyer, and out the front doors. As he crossed the threshold, a violent gust slammed the doors shut behind him. He stumbled down the steps and fell to his knees on the path, gasping for air. The estate towered above him, silent once more. But he knew better now. It wasn't abandoned. It wasn't empty. It wasn't done with him. ###, a warning in the rain. Dark clouds gathered overhead as Thomas crossed the grounds and reached the long dirt road. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavy, blurring the world around him. Halfway down the road, he saw a figure through the sheets of rain. A man stood waiting for him. Oh, the strange man he'd met earlier, the one studying tracks. Cole approached slowly, eyes wide. "You went inside, didn't you?" he said sharply. Thomas nodded, soaked and shivering. "Cole, there's something down there." Voice. "Woman. And a man who..." Cole cut him off. "You need to leave this town before nightfall." "I'm not leaving," Thomas said through chattering teeth. "I need answers." Cole grabbed Thomas's shoulders, his grip surprisingly strong. "You don't understand," Cole hissed. "People don't just vanish in this town, they're taken, lured. And once you hear her voice, you're marked." Thomas's breath hitched. "Mark." Cole's expression softened for a moment. "I'm trying to help you. Please listen. That house, it chooses who it wants." Thunder cracked overhead. Thomas stepped back. "Who, or what, is Eleanor?" Before Cole could answer, a loud snap echoed from the woods beside them, like a branch breaking under heavy weight. Cole stiffened. Then, without another word, he turned and bolted into the forest, disappearing between the trees. Thomas stared after him, stunned and confused. The rain poured harder. He turned back toward town, clutching his notebook tightly. He had more questions than ever before, but one thing was clear. The Rhodes estate wasn't done with him, and whatever lived within its walls had only just begun to wake.